Hi, this is Pat Duckworth, the author of Hot Women Rock, How to Discover Your Midlife Entrepreneurial Mojo. And today I'm talking to a new friend because sometimes it's people I've known for ages and sometimes it's people and women that I've met who just inspire me straight away and I want to bring them on and talk to them. So my guest today is the CEO of the Epiphany Process. She began understanding and expanding this process after the death of her daughter Jenny to suicide. As an international online consultant based in Harley Street, London, she's best known for her work in mental health and wellness. As a grief and trauma specialist, she's an author, speaker, and mentor, and she's helped people from around the world transcend the most horrific challenges such as terrorism, self-harm, life-threatening illnesses. She also certifies life coaches and healers in her signature process for achieving emotional resilience, and we all need a bit of that at the moment, and mastering the art of inner harmony. She's a published author with her life-defining story featured alongside Dr. Bernie Siegel, Dr. Michael Beckwith, Dr. John DeMartini, and Dr. Alveda King. So it's a very special welcome today to Jenetta Barry. Hi, Jenetta. How are you doing today?
Hi, Pat. Thank you so much for the invitation and the honor to be with you. And I'm doing pretty well under the circumstances.
Yes, so we only met about 2, 3 weeks ago at probably my last expedition to London before all of this virus stopped us and locked us all down. Are you based in London or do you live outside, Janetta?
I live just outside in Oxford, and normally I'm in London quite a bit.
Yeah.
So yes, I'm in London as much as Oxford.
Good. There's so much we could talk about. I really want to get going with your story. So tell me, what did you do when you first left full-time education? What was the start of your career?
I grew up in the theatre. My mother was in the West End here in London. My father was a record producer. And so I kind of naturally went into theatre, and I was training ballet at the University of Cape Town Ballet School, and decided it really was a really tough career. And over the years, I morphed into becoming a motivational speaker. And it's from there that I've got to here. Um, in a nutshell, I was pretty good at it, but I noticed people were coming back and saying, we need another dose of Jenetta or another fix. And I realized I was their drug and that it was not authentic. They would need me for the rest of their lives. So I took myself off for a few years and started expanding my intuition, because I knew that that would make it more authentic. And then I realized people were coming to me for that and not trusting their own intuition. And at the time that I started questioning this, one day I had an enormous argument with my daughter Jen, and I went to find her, and I found her hanging with a broken neck. And you can imagine the devastation. So much got destroyed in that moment. And prophetically, 9 months after she died, I came across the basics of this process. It was amazing. It helped me get through 3 times where I went through really dark times, which I'm sure you'll ask me about. And I morphed it into being the Epiphany Process today, Nairobi.
What drew you initially into the motivational speaking?
I stepped into sales, and with sales, I realized very soon as I headed up people with sales that it had nothing to do with selling anything and everything to do with growing people, and then the sales follow. It's not about sales. And that's where it started.
And so was your initial motivational speaking, was that corporately or did you immediately branch out on your own?
It was mostly corporate selling, corporate training. I did do individual presentations from time to time as well.
Yeah. And so then you had this real tragedy in your personal life. How did you cope with that initially? Were you already working in a field of self-help?
It was during that time where I was expanding my intuitive abilities. Um, so yes, I was very much in there, and as much as I had those abilities, you know, the meditation abilities and the intuitive abilities to help me through the devastation of losing Jenny the way I did and finding her hanging.
Mm.
It was not enough, and 3 times I went to a place of actually planning my suicide.
Mm.
And yeah, so it wasn't enough. And that's when I knew I had to find something that really worked if I
Yeah,
knew I was going to stay on the planet.
yeah. And then you developed that. Tell us more about developing that so that you could help others to get over their traumas.
Yeah. You know, the basic helped me tremendously. And but it still, for me, missed a lot of in betweens. It's very scientific and works in theory and practice, but it was missing the softness and the addition of intuition and the addition of being able to allow emotions more than the practical working through the thought processes that are in excess, because the process works through excessive thoughts and emotions and brings them into open-hearted, centered manageability
Mm.
on a conscious and an unconscious level. It's just the most amazing process. And I was able to add so much more to that, develop it one-to-one worldwide online. And then I wrote 2 certification programs to back it up and get people to become really masterful in it and even consult with it.
And how did you start out doing that? How did you bring that amazing process so that people could understand what you did?
Well, the very first thing I realized I had to make the decision to do was to walk the walk and talk the talk with the process. You know, if I haven't done the work, how on earth am I going to help anybody else when I go, well, you know, this is what you need to do, but I haven't done it.
Mm.
So, for a fair amount of time, through my darkest hours, I couldn't even think about helping other people. I tried it and I did help to a certain extent, and I practiced a lot, but I knew I had to work on me to a deeper level before I could really step forward comfortably and say, okay, this is where I am, this is what I'm spearheading, and I want it to go international online. As you possibly know, and most entrepreneurs know, it's a step-by-step process of trial and error. This worked, this didn't. Okay, I'm going to team up with this person. I went to New York for a year, expanding it there. Now I'm in London, expanding it here. Back in Kenya for a while as well, because I always say it's almost like the center of the world there. Um, and this is where I am today, through all that trial and error and working it myself, putting my money where my mouth is.
And in all this time when you're going through this really difficult personal situation, you're switching from that corporate work and sales and motivation into doing this kind of therapy work. What skills did you bring with you that meant that you could set up in this way to work with people?
I think one of the things was that I was growing people through sales
Mm.
already. So there was a lot of mentorship going on, and truly wanting to assist people to expand into their innate genius. So that I brought with me. But truly, I can say that I really stepped into being able to authentically help people, not rescue them.
Mm.
You know, it's so easy as the injured one to try and rescue others to rescue yourself. And that's the sort of stuff I realized was out of balance. And with this process, it's not about rescuing people. When people work it with me, it's because they've stepped into their power and made the choice that they cannot stand another minute of living the life the way they've been living, and they take ownership and accountability. And I'm not rescuing, even in the most dire circumstances.
That's really an important point, because this is all about giving, well, I don't even know if this is the right word, giving people back their control, or getting them to recognize their control. Because sometimes when you come to see a therapist, you give up some of your control to the therapist. It's really the therapist's job to give it back to you and say, you've got the resources, we just need to activate them. So that they can carry on. They're not reliant on you, that they can um, soothe themselves and work on themselves in a way that's very powerful. Is that how you see it?
Well, I can remember in my darkest hours where I just wondered how I could even take the next breath. Felt like I was stuck in an emotional hole, a prison sentence, a life prison sentence. And I remember going, if I go to conventional therapy with this, they'll try and fix me from outside myself. They'll try and put all sorts of medication down, which will be my control mechanism. And I won't be able to make the choices that I know my wisdom buried inside me will allow me to if I can access it. So I was aware of it then. There was no way I gave myself the option to go to conventional therapy and medicine. It just didn't feature, because I knew I'd lose my power, be it receiving it back over a long period of time, and sometimes never. It doesn't always get given back to you.
Yeah.
So it wasn't an option, just wasn't.
Yeah, yeah. So this is Pat Duckworth, and today my inspirational guest is Jenetta Barry, the CEO of the Epiphany Process. So Jenetta, again, there's just so many things we could talk about, but I really like asking my interviewees what they feel their purpose in life is. What drives you to do this work that you're doing?
I love that question, because people think that you've got to know that from early on. And yet I was a late developer. I thought it was helping people in sales and to find themselves and step into their power. And then I got very ill with cancer. I nearly died 20 odd years ago with cancer. And I thought that was it. That
Mm.
was, having survived that was my life purpose. And I really thought that's where I was on on check. But it's taken my greatest life test
Mm.
for me to realize that the very loss has stepped me into my innate wisdom, and I'm on my life purpose late in life.
Yeah, and I find that this happens to a lot of women at midlife, that those challenges that come at that stage can be the thing that spur you in to whatever you were put on this planet to do. And it also involves, that stage of life by itself involves changes of identity, that possibly we're going from who we thought we were as carers and parents and supporters into a new identity of doing something that's really important to us, whether it's in a business context or a community context or a charity or volunteer context. What would you say were the challenges for you in moving identity from being this salesperson and motivational speaker to doing the type of work you do today?
The transition from sales to spiritual to what I'm doing today was fairly easy. It wasn't easy, but it was fairly natural until I lost Jet.
Mm.
And then it was huge. It was a huge transition, because I lost everything overnight on every level of my being. I went to ground zero.
Mm.
So that transition was huge. But for me, I mean, a lot of people say, wow, you've done so amazingly well and achieved so much. And I go, yeah, it's taken me a lifetime to do that,
Mm.
not overnight, because those challenges, it always comes at a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So since losing Jen, the sacrifice is that I have been mostly on my own, working this worldwide, traveling worldwide on my own. It can be very lonely, it can be very daunting, um, especially when you start stepping more and more into your truth, which isn't necessarily other people's truths, and the triggers that that can bring out in people when you're out there internationally. Publishing my story that you mentioned in my intro, pressing that button as it went off to be published worldwide was the most scary thing, as it showed my vulnerability as a failure as a mother. All those transitions were huge after Jen died. So
Yeah.
I did exponential growth when I always thought I'd been very growth filled before that.
Yeah, yeah, it's huge, and we shouldn't underestimate you give things up as well as gaining things when you make these transitions. I don't know if you know that story. You just reminded me of Picasso being interviewed when he was in his 80s, and the interviewer on TV asked him to draw something on a piece of paper, and he just did a few lines, and of course it was fantastic. And the interviewer said, wow, that took you like 2 minutes and it's worth hundreds of thousands of pounds. And he said, that took me 80 years.
Exactly.
And
That's it.
it's
Spot on.
everything that we are now didn't just happen, it's happened for all the years that we've been developing and experiencing.
Yeah, and I think that sacrifice is the big thing, is understanding that anything worth doing comes at a price that you have to pay in different energy forms, whatever that price might be, or
Yeah.
prices.
Yeah. So what does success mean to you now?
Well, especially now, with what we're dealing with worldwide, as the whole world reshakes down into all being in the same place, really.
Mm.
Nobody's really any different from anybody else, no matter what your triggers are, or where you're not passionate or passionate. So it feels like this has been almost the time I've been preparing for on a global universal level.
Yeah.
Um, and being able to be there for those who are really on the edge. We've made some decisions over the last 10 days since this has all happened on how to restructure the epiphany process. And so being able to very soundly being there for people who are very on the edge of breaking and feeling suicidal, and then being able to be accessible to those who are not in a different way,
Yeah.
where there's still an exchange.
Yeah.
So that I can feel that. I've felt it for the last while, even before the crash happened. In fact, that crash happened that day you and I met.
Yes.
The world turned upside down that day, and which is just so amazing.
Yeah.
Um, and I could feel it before, that I was preparing for something. There is no doubt that this is where I've come to,
Yeah.
because of, yeah, this is it.
I think a lot of people are recognizing that they need to step forward now as the leaders that they were
Yeah.
waiting for. We are those people.
Yes, and it doesn't have to be in a big way. It doesn't need a fanfare. It's just about showing up all the time and showing presence and being out there, be it social media, choice words, choice actions, choice sentences, a precious interview like this one. I have noticed in the last couple of weeks, people are coming forward and saying, can we interview you? Which is happening more. This is the time to be the mouthpiece to show people that there are ways to very powerfully step forward because of what's happening.
Yeah, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And so if you had one or two top tips for any new entrepreneurs stepping into this world now, what would you say to them?
I think the big thing is don't look at perfection being or success being the measure of being perfect. That it's not about being perfect, it's about being messy as well. Understanding the value of trying things that don't work, how important they are, and also the value, because one of the things my process works, it's connected to cycles, is understanding that if you've got, say, 100 people who sing your praises, you're going to have 100 people who think you're up to maggots. And as an entrepreneur, that's difficult to handle those other 100 who you feel are opposing you and trying to shut you down. And that's why I love this process, because it gives you really real meaningful skills to understand the value, the equal value of those people who oppose you, that if you didn't have them, you wouldn't succeed.
Yeah, yeah,
And
fantastic.
that's the biggest thing stepping out as an entrepreneur, is understanding the balance of both the positive and negative of what is working and isn't.
Yeah, yeah, lovely. So, people watching, if they want to find out more about you and your process or connect with you, how do they do that?
There's the website, which is theepiphanyprocess.com. There's also a Facebook page called Jenetta Barry and the Epiphany Process, which has a lot of informative bits and pieces, and another page that has a pretty big following called the Grief Coach as well on Facebook.
Lovely.
Um, and if you want to personally contact me, it's Jenetta at theepiphanyprocess.com.
Fantastic. So, what have we learnt today? We've learnt that transitions come from all sorts of situations and that they come at a price. But that price is important and you have to be willing to pay in order to move forward. That you're not broken, you don't need fixing. It's about finding your strengths and finding the control within you. And as a new entrepreneur, um, it's really about understanding that the more successful you get, the more people you will find on the other side, the balance, who don't think that your work is very good. And it's about learning to deal with that, not being afraid of it. It's okay. You're not for everyone. And the people who love what you do and who need you will find you. So important lessons. Thank you so much, Jenetta. I'm so glad we met that short time ago and that we've made this connection.
It's such an honor, and thank you for inviting me today. I'm inspired for what you're doing as well. Thank you.
You're really welcome. So to all our viewers, keep watching out for more of these conversations with inspirational and amazing entrepreneurs. I'll see you next time.